I'm in a good mood this morning, in case you couldn't tell. I didn't sleep very well last night, though, you guys. I think it was all the adrenaline, like it's so hard to offload that aspect of your physicality when you've been running at like level 17 out of 10 for the last 6 weeks. Anyway, welcome to Resistance Live. It's the 31st of May, 2024. Happy Conviction AM. Glad you're all here. For our visually challenged viewers today, I am wearing a blue sleeveless shirt, navy blue. My hair is pulled back. My thick gold hoops are in. I am in front of my plant and my lamp and my standing chair. Pink skin, green-eyed, dirty blonde-haired woman. Nice to see you. And I'm coming to you, as always, from occupied Tonga territory. Okay, just about 5 minutes ago, Trump finished an incredibly insane rant at Trump Tower. And I have to say, I saw some of our regular followers on Threads asking why MSNBC and CNN were carrying it. I'm just going to have to say this. I actually think it was a really good thing that mainstream media covered this morning, because those of us who are not watching Trump on a regular basis, not running around inside his insane cult, watching all of his, I'm not ignoring my shelf. You guys are hilarious. Not running around in all of his cult gear, looking at what he's doing, may not have realized how absolutely off the list he's fallen in terms of sanity. And he had no prepared remarks. He had no teleprompter. And it was essentially like a 40-minute rant of gibberish, grievance, and gag order violations. So let's just start there. I want everyone to understand that the gag order is still in effect. And Donald Trump spent no less than a quarter of his quote unquote press conference this morning attacking Michael Cohen. He didn't mention Michael Cohen by name, but he made it very, very clear exactly who he was talking about. He also attacked his own trial team with his lawyer standing off to the side, which is kind of a fascinating choice. But in any event, this is a really interesting thing because he is still under a gag order. He's still not allowed to attack witnesses, including Michael Cohen. And so I don't know what the prosecution is going to opt to do with this, but I will tell you that he was warned last time that if he did what he did today, he was going to go to jail. And they've got a complete basis right now to ask for another sanction of the gag order that would send him off to the clink. So, you have to ask yourself questions at this point as to why it is that his attorneys even let him do this. Now, granted, Todd Blanche gave an interview last night on CNN where he said that Donald Trump was involved in literally every decision that was made by this team, by the defense team during the trial, which, by the way, also eviscerates an ineffective assistance of counsel argument in large part. So clearly Donald Trump is running the show on this, but he really didn't do himself any favors here. And I want to remind you all, we talked about this yesterday on the bonus broadcast after the conviction, but I want to remind you all that there are factors to be considered in sentencing, and they're not small, right? The way in which you get a lesser sentence is by taking accountability and apologizing for what you've done and expressing remorse. And instead, literally all Donald Trump did this morning was attack the witnesses, attack the judge, attack the trial process, attack the entire state of New York, and claim that everything is rigged and being run by the Biden administration. It's insane. Truly an insane moment. Now, I warned everybody about this in advance when we knew that this was coming on Threads, because I just want, speaking, I know you all like my kind of trauma-informed commentary on this. So let me just say a couple things about that, all right? Malignant narcissists, when they are faced down finally with their own accountability, really decompensate very quickly. Their mental capacity kind of goes off the rails. And, I've seen this in my own life where, narcissists, when they are finally confronted with the consequences of their own actions, become ranting and raving, interrupting, even in courts of law, will interrupt a judge. They will engage in all sorts of conduct that is really not something that people who can self-regulate would ever engage in. And on top of it, because this narcissistic injury is perhaps the worst one that he's ever experienced, aside from losing an election, because I actually think the election was more of a wound to him than this. One of the things that means is that they are scrambling to shore up their false sense of self. Because if their false sense of self doesn't have, a reflection in the views of other people, they're left with, as I routinely describe it, the dark pit of nothingness that is their soul. So he is going to be, as I predicted, more unhinged than we've ever seen him before. And I will also just say that if you watched any portion of this quote unquote press conference this morning, what you will have seen is someone who literally had trouble stringing a sentence together. He would blurt out a phrase and then the phrase would go nowhere. He would put like some comment about Biden being too old to run next to a comment about witnesses being quote unquote literally crucified in the courtroom. It's just things that don't make any logical sense, right? And then on top of it, it was completely laced with racist xenophobia about all people of color who are coming over the border, allegedly, about the idea that there's just like millions of terrorists flooding the border, just all sorts of really insane stuff. And I do think, I'm just going to say this. I have recommended for a long time that, like press didn't cover him, that we didn't watch it. This was a moment to watch, because if you have not seen him recently, there is such a massive difference between, and I said this was going to happen. There's such a massive difference between what he would say even 2 months ago before this trial started and where he is today. I mean, it's just like gibberish nonsense, blunt racism, not that that's any different than how he's ever been. And, essentially victimhood and grievance. So, he didn't do himself any favors, certainly on sentencing. And I will just say this also, he defamed Michael Cohen in addition to violating the gag order. He accused Michael Cohen of bank fraud. Accusing someone of a crime without evidence of it is defamation per se. So all of this at this point is not good for him. And I guess that's like the theme of the day. All right. Now I have to say something to all of you over on the Patreon feed, because I got to remind you all, reminder, if you're not a paid subscriber over at patreon.com, you should get on over there. They started as little as $5 a month, and you can ask me questions for 2 hours in advance of every broadcast. The question feed this morning was insanely long. And I have to remind you all of something, particularly our wonderful Patreon subscribers. Okay. And it's this: the media is going to be searching for reasons to continue to make you outraged and afraid. Okay. Because it generates clicks. So there's a whole bunch of people over there this morning who were like, what if it goes to the Supreme Court, right? What if the appeal, what if somebody invokes the Supreme Court right now and the appeal gets overturned? Okay, you can't do that, first of all, okay? Second of all, I want to explain something to you about the way the Supreme Court works, okay? First of all, Trump can't go to the Supreme Court until he's gone through the entire appellate structure of New York State. So the first possibility of appeal here is the appellate division of New York Supreme. I got to remind you all, New York Supreme Court is the trial court in New York State. Misnomer, okay? But New York Supreme is actually where he was tried. That is the trial court in New York State. Then there is New York Supreme Appellate Division, which is the intermediate level court. Then there's the New York Court of Appeals, which is like technically what the Supreme Court would be in any other state. Highest level state Supreme Court. Then, and only then, does he have the possibility of petitioning the Supreme Court for certiorari. All right? Now, so he's got 3 layers to get through in the New York State court system before he can even get anywhere near the Supreme Court. Now, in addition to that fact, I want to remind you all something of how the Supreme Court works in terms of timetables, okay? The Supreme Court is right now at the end of this term. The terms of the Supreme Court run from October to June, okay? They cannot take on any new cases right now until next term. The earliest, even let's just say hypothetically, Trump manages, this will never happen, to run through the entire New York appellate system in the next month. Never going to happen. Over, not possible. Just telling you all right now. The U.S. Supreme Court could not hear this case until at the very earliest, October of this year. Okay. And they're not going to rule on that case until after the election. Because, by the way, they've already got scheduled out oral arguments and briefing schedules for October for all the cases they've already taken for next term. Okay. So everyone who is at the moment very concerned about the Supreme Court, you guys just need to take like a huge deep breath. All right. Just a huge deep breath and stop allowing yourself to be ginned up by, all the kind of like, cycling into despair and catastrophizing that I know we're all used to doing. All right. Like, this is a really good moment to take a deep breath and be grateful. Okay. So let me just say something else here about a couple of other things that we need to kind of like be mindful of. Do we have a troll? I'm just like scrolling here really quick. Bye. Okay. So let's just talk about a couple of other things related to SCOTUS, because there was another question about the Supreme Court this morning. Like, does this have any impact on the presidential immunity ruling? No, none, nothing. The presidential immunity case arises out of the prosecution that is before Judge Chutkin's court in the District Court of the District of Columbia. The Supreme Court is not allowed to rule on anything that isn't a ripe conflict, okay? They cannot rule on another case unless that case is brought before them through the traditional processes and procedures of appellate courts, okay? So again, nobody really needs to worry about this. I mean, seriously, like, you do not need to worry about this at this point. And, I'll also just say one other thing. We don't even know what the bases of the appeal are going to be. And this case will not be ripe for an appeal until after he is sentenced. Okay. So the sentencing date is July 11th. Okay. And before that, there will be pre-sentencing memoranda. We've talked about this a lot. The prosecution will make recommendations. So will the defense. There will be a probation report filed about him and his nature. And then the judge will sentence him. Okay. And so we don't even have to worry about appeals until literally like 4 days, and even then, before the Republican National Convention, because I'm going to remind you, he's being sentenced literally 4 days before the Republican National Convention. All right. So everybody take a breath, just like take a really, really deep breath about this. All right. It's a good moment, and you're allowed to feel good, right? Like, you're allowed to have some joy about what happened without panicking about the future. All right. So that's the deal on that. Okay. The gag order is still in effect, as we discussed, unless and until the judge lifts it. So violations of the gag order are still violations of the gag order. And that will be in effect unless and until Judge Merchan says it's not. So again, he could go to jail for gag order violations at this point if the prosecution asks for that. Okay. What else? Okay. So, somebody asked a question about how this conviction affects his pending cases, other pending cases. So the conditions of release in the other cases, and conditions of release generally, require you to not commit crimes while you're either out on bail or ROR'd. Okay. Obviously he has now been convicted of a crime, and that is a basis to have him detained pre-trial as a violation of his release conditions. Now, whether or not that happens is a huge question, okay? Like, Fonnie Willis could ask for it. Jack Smith could ask for it. He's not going to ask for it. Probably he's already asked for it for different reasons in front of Judge Cannon and been shot down. But, he could ask for it. Judge Chutkin is still enforcing the gag order and the release conditions in her court. Jack Smith could ask for it there. So again, we've really got to see what happens next in terms of what the prosecutors demand. But yes, I mean, technically he's violated his conditions of release now. So that's also, just like a huge issue, And we have yet to see how that's all going to play out. Okay. Lots of people on the Patreon feed this morning freaked out about Trump's fundraising. And I just have to remind you guys of something. Like, I just really want to make this clear, because he also said something about this morning at Trump Tower. Okay. I just want to remind you all that he's now been convicted of 34 felonies where the underlying crime that made these crimes felonies is election crimes. Okay. Like election interference crimes, finance related election interference crimes. Okay. Nobody should be taking it at face value that they actually made that money. Like, that, one of the things that's been terribly bothersome about me at this point is that, like, there's, let me get this guy. Bye. One of the things that's been terribly bothersome about this at this point is that, we're in a situation here where Trump all the time spouts off, we made $50 million. We made $34 million. We made this, we made that. There's no back check on that. And I have to say that when the actual filings to the FEC are done every quarter, what we're seeing is actually they have like no cash on hand, because literally like everything that he raises has been going to pay his attorneys. So no one should be freaking out at this point about the fact that he's claiming he's made this amount of money. You should take all of that with a grain of salt, a very big grain of salt. And don't be walking around at this point thinking that we've got anything to worry about because he's raising all this money. Like, nobody knows. Nobody knows. Okay. All right. So that's that. Okay. Final thing, and I can't read my note here. You guys are gonna have to give me a second to just like read my note. Okay. I can't read my note, but I'm going to say one other thing about this. All right. The Biden administration, the Biden campaign has made very limited statements about this. And I think that that is actually the right call from the perspective of what the Biden campaign should be doing. Now, in addition to the conviction, this whole thing this morning at Trump Tower has given the Biden campaign a wealth of video on which to make campaign ads and blurbs. The Biden Harris HQ is already okay, I'm going to just give that a second. I'm going to come back to that person. The Biden Harris HQ feed on Threads is already like pumping out stuff about what happened this morning. All right. But I'm just going to say this. Okay. Like the Biden campaign now has a moment where it can really pivot to focusing on the good stuff, right? Like everything that they've accomplished. Like there was a huge announcement this week that went totally over everyone's head that they have taken steps now to make sure that medical debt doesn't appear on credit reports anymore. That's a massive deal for a lot of Americans who have been sick in this country. And every day there are kind of like incremental things that the administration is continuing to do to benefit everyday Americans. There have been great speeches given this week. Biden gave a great speech on the significance of Black Americans to democracy, right? Kamala Harris has been running around the country doing phenomenal speeches on abortion rights. And it's time to really pivot back to focusing on the future vision. Now, those of you who have been here for a long time have heard me talk about this. Values, villain, vision is like the three-part messaging strategy that is most recommended by progressive messaging strategists. And because we've all been like down the hole of the Trump trial for the last 6 weeks, there's been a lot of really interesting stuff happening that has just like flown over everybody's head. So I want to remind everyone at this point that it's incredibly important to not forget all the really good stuff that we're going to need to be relying on in order to win in November. And I got to tell you all something else, all right? I said yesterday, and I truly mean this, that we have no idea what's going to happen between now and the Republican National Convention. I said this morning on Threads, that as I've said many times here, that the GOP has tied themselves to a sinking ship. And that this morning, they're all running around going like, oh, the ship is lit. Why is there a bomb on the ship? This bomb went off on the ship. This is so unfair, but we put the bomb on the ship, but who knew it was going to go off, right? Like they're really they're sinking. And I don't know whether or not there's going to be a CTJ kind of moment where they show up and are like, we got to nominate somebody else. But the thing to remember here is that regardless, right? November is the true test of the future of our democracy. Like yesterday is a huge deal, and I don't want to discount it. He looks beaten. He looks downtrodden. He's also got all these GOP sycophants propping him up when like he's guilty as sin, right? It doesn't look good for the party. It's definitely not a plus for the presidential election. But I'm also just going to remind everybody that it is so important to not take your eyes off the ball in November. And one of the things that's going to be required there, because a lot of people are paying attention all of a sudden who were not paying attention before, there was a breaking news report this morning that the Google searches on Trump last night were up by like 3,900%. And I have to remind you all, as I have said here many times over the last 7 years, there's a lot of people who aren't like political junkies in the way that we are, right? Who are not as focused immediately on what's happening minute by minute. And those are the voters that we really need to focus on to get them out to the polls. There's a lot of attention right now on what's finally happening. Again, this is a really good reason why that speech was carried live this morning, because he's crazy, right? He's like, he has dementia. He's also completely off the rails. He's like racist grandpa screaming from the porch about his own victimhood. All right. It's very, very good that people are finally starting to see that, but we can't lose the opportunity to also remind all those people of everything that could be possible if we elect Democrats up and down the ticket in November. And that includes your local elections all the way up to the presidency. Okay. So it's a really good moment to think about what this opportunity presents in terms of attention, in terms of conversations, right? I'm hearing from all sorts of people who are like, I was walking around my office this morning and someone was singing like once, twice, 34 times a felon. That's awesome, right? And that's also an opportunity to have a conversation about why it's so critical to vote, why it's so important that we vote from the bottom up, our most local elections, all the way up the ticket, and why we must vote for Democratic and progressive candidates. So I really just want to remind you all that like November is still the end game, and that, you know, we may have another trial between now and then, depending on how the Supreme Court rules on immunity. Judge Chutkan's case could go to trial in the fall. Fani Willis could still get a trial at the end of the summer. That all of this is still possible, and I, of course, will still be here for all of it, which is why you should like this broadcast and subscribe to this channel, because I'm going to be here 5 days a week or more, no matter what's happening. But I do just very, very much want people to understand that we have to take the energy behind these victories and run with them, because they're rare. You know, we here, longtime followers, we've been waiting for a conviction for 7.5 years. Those of you who were here back in the day know that I predicted this was going to happen in August of 2017 initially, and that he wouldn't survive beyond that point, because I, as was the case with many lawyers, had no idea how many loopholes he was prepared to exploit in the criminal justice system and in our like democracy generally. But all that said, right, we've been waiting for this moment for a very long time, but this is truly an opportunity. And I just very much want everyone to remember that you've got to get involved, that this is a great moment in every conversation you have about what happened yesterday to remind people that it's not over until it's over, that we still have to vote in November, that people have got to get out and like talk to their neighbors and their friends and their colleagues about it. And that, you know, you've got to start checking your voter registrations now, because there are so many voter suppression efforts underway in so many states. You've got to know when the final day is to register to vote. You should know when early voting begins. You should be prepared to inform everybody you know about these things. Okay. So very, very critical at this point to get directly involved and to make sure that you're doing all the things that we all know we need to be doing to make sure that Democrats win. Okay. I'm going to tell you all one other thing here. Okay. Trump is only going to get more unhinged the closer that we get to sentencing. I warned you all before this trial started that he was going to be a very different person at the end of it than he was at the beginning. That's already radically apparent. But just remember that narcissists, and particularly like antisocial and sociopathic narcissists, do not get better. They only get worse. That there's only one route. Okay. Like they can't be treated. They will never expect that never admit rather that there's something wrong with them, or that they've done something wrong, or that they're facing accountability and they're sorry. That's never going to happen. This is only going to get worse. Okay. So just remember that, getting outraged about what he does when he does it, because there will be more and it'll be later on today, if not within the hour, is not the most effective use of your time right now. It's good to be aware. Okay. It's good to be aware of what he is saying and what he's doing, but you do not have to allow yourself to get outraged and afraid in the process of all of this. And in fact, the more that he does this, the worse it's going to get for the GOP. So let's just all be very focused on doing all the get out the vote work that we've talked about so many times here. I want to encourage everybody to go to mobilize.us and sign up today to do something for a campaign that you care about. Yesterday, I was focusing on Senate campaigns. Colin Allred running against Ted Cruz. Sherrod Brown's in a very tight re-election race. Ruben Gallego running against Kari Lake in Arizona. Debbie Murcassel-Powell running to unseat Rick Scott, who has to go, really needs to go, all right? And there are various others who desperately need our support. 33 senators are up for re-election this year, on top of the entire House of Representatives. All right. So there's a lot of people who need our support and work. And you can go to mobilize.us and just sign up to do 1-2 hour text banking session from your couch. And you will be making a huge difference toward the future of America and making sure that our democracy survives. So that's all really critical. Okay. One final question that has come up in the chat. Can he delay sentencing? No, he cannot. That is in the hands of Judge Merchan. So nobody really needs to worry about this. Nobody needs to worry about it. He is going to be sentenced on July 11th. And I know there are some people running around this morning saying that there's no way he's going to do prison time. We've talked about my friend Eliza Orlins, who I have such respect for. She's awesome. She's a public defender in New York. And I will just tell you that I disagree with her on this. And I'm not alone in that. There's a lot of us, including Norm Eisen, who have done the research about whether or not quote unquote first-time offenders can be sentenced for these crimes. I'm going to remind you all that the fact that Trump has violated the gag order 10 times can be a factor to be considered in his sentencing. So there is a very strong, basis here for him to serve time. And I'm going to tell you right now, I predicted this yesterday and I'm standing by it. The prosecution is going to ask for prison time. We shall see what they ask for, but they're going to ask for prison time. And we'll see what happens next. Okay. So, I just want to, thank all of you for your viewership here. As always, thanks to our Patreon subscribers, particularly. I want to ask you to thumbs up this broadcast. Drop me a comment if you're watching on the replay. And also, I'll just mention we have this incredible program that's starting in 2 weeks called Roadmap to November. It's only $99. I'm going to drop a link over here for you all to sign up if you would like to. But it is a 4-week program with a great community and 4 live calls with me on how to organize all your efforts to get out the vote between now and November. It's really designed to be very easily accessible so everybody can get trained on what they need to do to get going and have a plan for your own engagement based on your own bandwidth and what you're capable of giving, because everybody's got something. Like, I'm a single mom of 2 kids and I still canvassed for people in the last 3 elections. So you can do that too. And we're going to teach you how to do it. All right. So I hope you'll join us for that. I will catch all of our Patreon subscribers here for Progressive Coffee Hour on Sunday. By the way, become a paid subscriber over at Patreon. You get to hang out with all of us on Sunday morning, 8:30 Pacific, 11:30 Eastern. And I will answer like kind of any question you have beyond politics, but also like it's a lot more laid back and relaxed. So you can join us for that if you would care to. Otherwise, I will catch you all back here on Monday morning at regular time, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. Wish you all a peaceful and relaxing weekend. And I hope everybody takes a break. Mad gratitude to everybody for your focus and your support of this channel. And I will see you all very, very soon. All right. Enjoy the day and don't forget to celebrate. We have to acknowledge our wins. It's really critical to our mindset, to our hope, to our possibility, to our capacity to carry forward. Like, acknowledge that it's a good day. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye.